just, I think, maybe afternoon. Anyway, here too, on behalf of us all here, to introduce David so minimally, because he will explain it all. But if we go back to the 1970s, I think 1973, he started at the ABC as a cinema man, person, whatever he was. But he had the greats. Up front of camera, we know those people. The ones who are doing the filming are the hidden observers, and our ABC as our public broadcaster, Triple J, podcasts, the whole bit, we have to have them, and we have to nurture them, and we have to acknowledge the tradition that's come over this long period, 50 plus years, the friends, but the people who've worked there, they are our treasures. And here is one, it's simply he's from the Northern Beaches, I'm the Northern Beaches. Thank you to the Northern Beaches, people have turned up, which is the We're all part of Northern Sydney, thank you very much. And David Collins, thank you everyone.
Hello everybody, I just want to acknowledge our Indigenous cousins, the Daramagal, the Gamaragal and the Darug people. Well, who would have thought I'm up here doing this? Because I'm a guy who hangs out behind the camera and I just watch other people say things. So that brings me with my first point. My job description, living other people's lives vicariously. What do you think? It works? Because that's what I've done. I've been privileged over the last 50 years to film many amazing people and share their experiences. So I was at uni and I wasn't doing too well. I was trying to do a med degree and I bombed out of that. I was enjoying drama, so I thought I could maybe get a job. And I managed to get into the ABC. So in 1973 I started in a place called Central Files. Now most people at the ABC joined who were doing what I was doing, were in the mail room and then they worked into different areas. I thought I was going to be a director anyhow. I'd like to have done that. I was in Central Files, taking the mail up to Talbot Duck Manton, who was the head. He was on the 12th floor. So I had lots of fun catching that lift and meeting all sorts of crazy people in Broadcast House. Anyhow, eventually I made it to Gore Hill. I ended up in the film library where I worked with some amazing, now great film producers and directors, people like Rolf de Heer, some extraordinary people there. Then I finally got down the garage in the building I was working in. There was a whole bunch of long-haired hippies down there who looked pretty interesting, and I thought, yeah, that was the cine camera section. And I finally got into the cine camera store, which was just amazing. So I was fixing the cameras and going out and getting all the gear repaired for this amazing mob of people who were making films. Because up to in 1956, the ABC didn't think they needed film cameras. They were going electronic, and suddenly the Olympics came along, and they thought, hang on, we don't have any field cameras. What are we going to do? And suddenly they had to get cinematographers in. So that's where the cine camera department started. So the store I was in, it was very famous for one particular person, Bill Ryman. He regularly told desperate camera crews needing gear, you can't have that, someone might need it. And I used to look at this and go, oh, hang on, I'll just go and find you that light media read. Anyhow, so there were just about every camera in the world in that camera store, so I spent a lot of time out the back where there was an Italian guy, Fernando Gallant, and he was testing all the cameras as they came in for repair, because essentially, they'd go out, they'd need to make sure that the focus was working, this was working. He was an operator on The Last Tango in Paris. He'd worked with Visconti, he'd worked with Fellini. His record was extraordinary, but he didn't speak English very well. So they had him testing cameras out the back, which was a bonus for me, because not only did he teach me about every camera that was there, but I learned to drink some nice red wine on Friday afternoons. I learned quite a lot of Italian, and there we go. So I finally got out of the store, and that was about 1976, and joined the world of news and current affairs as a cine camera assistant. Now in those days, the news crews that were in the field it comprised of a cameraman and his assistant, which was me, holding a microphone, and loading the magazines. And the magazines lasted 10 minutes, so you literally had 10 minutes and then you were putting a new film mag on the camera. So I was always pretty busy. So news led to documentaries. Now, I'll just run down the way the cine camera crews worked. A documentary cine camera crew was usually about 3 people. Cinematographer, sound recordist, and a camera assistant, which I was at this point. Now, when I went into drama and those sort of areas, we had a much bigger crew. We had a director of photography, camera operator, focus puller, fiddling those lenses, a clapper loader, that's a good one, and that's the guy who goes, "Take one," and loads the magazines, rushes off to load another magazine. So I did all of those jobs over the years, and then you've got the sound group, which was sound recordists and how many boom operators they ever needed. I worked in all of those areas as a camera assistant, so it was pretty exciting. But I think my first really big adventure was working on Big Country. Fabulous show. And one of the first trips I did was going to the Northern Territory. Our producer, David Flatman, had just upgraded his pilot's licence to twin-engine planes. So we hired a Piper Navajo and flew off to Catherine, to a property called Killarney. Now, this doco we were making was about a guy called Bill Tapp, who was at that point known as the Cattle King. Our first day was filming a cattle muster, which involved helicopters and stockmen. Bill hopped into a Bell 47 helicopter and flew off. Great shot. I was underneath the helicopter. It went, whoop. It's fabulous. I really got a great shot of that. Because I was, as the assistant, I was the second camera, so I was getting all the special little shots. Anyhow, a little later we noticed a fire in the distance. David, our producer, said to Bill's son, "I think they've crashed. We're going to go back to the house to ring emergency services," because we could see this fire on the ridge. So we're driving along the track and we come across these 2 forlorn characters standing on the side of the road. The helicopter had crashed and it had gone into a dive and they hadn't come out. So luckily it was a Bell 47, it had that big window, the big circular plastic windscreen that it had. It had shattered, so they basically were able to undo their belts and just walk out of the plane. So they were both okay. Bill had damaged his knee, but the pilot was fine. So that night we got them back. That night we were having a drink at the Stockman shack with the pilot, and he declared, "I've got to get back in the saddle tomorrow, otherwise I'm never going to fly again." We're going, "Oh, wow, this is getting interesting." Bill was so badly injured that our doco with him suddenly stopped. We weren't able to do anything. Now, there's a story to Bill's injury. That injury changed his life dramatically. He became an alcoholic and ended up getting into enormous debt. His family is spread all over the territory. Every time I go up there, I run into 1 or 2 of them. But they ended up having to sue a large rural financing company because the company took all their properties away from them. So that all started at this moment when he was in that helicopter. Quite extraordinary. Anyhow, we couldn't continue with that doco. We turned around and we decided we'd do a doco, a big country called The Drivers. It was about heli mustering in the Northern Territory. Some of the most exciting flying I've ever done. And I'm only the assistant on this. I was the second camera. So the other guy, the cameraman, he was getting the most extraordinary stuff. I was getting pretty exciting stuff. I mean, you're flying in a helicopter, you're zooming down like this, and you're flying around 20 foot off the ground, pushing a ball out of a tree. It was amazing, man. So what I loved about Big Country was that it took me all over the country, and I rapidly learnt how important the ABC is to our rural cousins. And it still is. Thank God we have landline, thank God we have Countrywide, we have so much stuff out there. And every town in Australia, a major town, has an ABC journalist in it. So we really do go out of our way to make sure that they're thought of. So another great series to come out of the same rural department, which was what was making Big Country, was Jack Absalom's Outback. And I was lucky enough to be the camera assistant on that, working with a really interesting man, Sándor Shiro, who was Hungarian. There was a lot of different nationalities working in the cine camera, and Sándor was Hungarian. So off we went to do Jack Absalom's Outback. Jack lived in Broken Hill. He was a kangaroo shooter. He was also a tour guide, used to take artists out into the country, and that's where he learned to become an artist himself. So we travelled to the Flinders Ranges, which was just, you know, the back roads with Jack was just extraordinary. He was driving a ute. I was in an ABC drama truck, which should never have been out there, but they only had one four-wheel drive in the place at the time, and the producers had that. So we got trapped by floods at Arkaroola. The roads closed behind us, and we couldn't get out there, so we were there for a whole week, just mucking around in it. We ended up rolling that camera truck in the middle of the desert. Everyone else was in front of us going off to set lunch up, and they were sitting up there going, "Where are they?" And they came back, and there was the truck on the side, and we weren't going anywhere. We went back to Broken Hill, and they set up another truck exactly the same, which didn't help us at all. But crazy. But we also did things like camping by the dingo fence. We followed the dingo fence. Now, we were staying in a hut. It was very hot. Everyone decided they'd stay inside the hut because of the insects. I slept on the veranda because out the back in the shed were about 20 dead kangaroos, and the place stank like no one's business. But that night, with Shandor, I'm sitting by around a fireplace, and I turned across to Shandor, and he had tears streaming down his face. And I said, "Are you okay? What's wrong?" He said to me, it was a wonderful moment. He said, "David, I am back on the Hungarian steppes." This memory at night of that had taken him home to a place he'd left in 1956, very traumatised with the Russians invading, and he was back there. And he was, you know, so I just thought, this is something special about this place, this magic of Australia. It encaptures all of us in beautiful ways. And he was one of many famous characters. There was the crew of the first James Bond films were there. A guy called John Winbolt, who was one of the operators, and John Shinerock. And John Shinerock was the focus puller. John was an operator. So they all knew, they had done all the early James Bond films. They were fantastic. There was another crazy dude who I loved working with, Heinz Walzer. He'd been in the SS Panzerbrigade in the World War II and never stopped telling me about it. Shandor from Hungary, Fernando, a whole bunch of eclectic people from Egypt, from all over the country, all over the world. So it was a fabulous place to work. And then, that's before I mentioned the bloody Aussies that worked there. There were some great guys, one of whom, Terry Byrne, I really enjoyed working with. Terry turned 102 this year, and there's a lovely picture of him marching in the Anzac Parade. So he's still going, and he's still a really amazing man. Terry loves his coffee. Like a lot of the camera people I worked with, we all spent a lot of time at Kalutsi's, which was in Darlinghurst, because the ABC radio studio was just near there, so we often used to pop up to Victoria Street and have a coffee, especially if you were on the 6 o'clock shift, like I did a lot. And we all went to No Names, so everyone knows how to eat a good spaghetti bowl. So they'll be under serious, I'll be checking it out. But a few years back, I went out to one of Kalutsi's coffee shops out near Prince of Wales Hospital, and his daughter was there, and Dad was out the back, and she got Dad and said, "Dad, come out and say hello to David." You know, the first thing he said to me was, "Hey, ABC!" And that's what he remembered. It was just wonderful. So after that, after the rural area, I went to work on Bill Peach's Holiday, of all things. Suddenly I'm doing a holiday show. With not Bill, unfortunately. It would have been lovely to do stuff with him. I did a couple of little stories with Bill, but we went overseas with a guy called Mark Hamlin, and the trip was Egypt, Jordan, and Europe. So Europe was Spain and France and England, so not a bad trip. 3 months away. Part of that was we ended up in the Valley of the Kings, and they just opened up King Tut's tomb. So we were the first film crew to go in there, which was fantastic, because there's Tut over there, lying there, no mummy or just black little body over there, and we're filming around him, and I thought, oh, okay, so I'm sharing a room with you, mate. Every time I feel very close to that person. He was an interesting person. So we ended up back in Spain after Egypt. Egypt was just fantastic. It really was a wonderful place to go and do a holiday show. Jordan also, going into Israel was amazing, seeing Israel and being in there not long after the 6-Day War. You know, and as doing a holiday show, it's a very different world. So you do see a bit of the war and the war-torn things, but you tend to see things from a very different angle. And that's what had happened to us in Spain. We ended up on, as usual, so many of these programs, you're doing a bus tour of Spain. And of course, we were told we were getting a bus tour of English-speaking Australian people on board. Well, we get on the bus, they're all German. No one spoke any English. So, you know, we filmed along and we went all through some wonderful places in Spain with them. We had some great moments. We went to bullfights. It was just a gorgeous trip. And at the end of the trip, we're getting off the bus and the sound recordist, his name is Gunter Ercoli. So he's got a good Italian name, but Gunter was German. He turned to everyone on the bus and said a number of words to them very politely, thanked them in German. And they're all looking at him going, hang on, he has heard everything we've said for the last 2 weeks. And they had said some pretty bad things. Why are these guys holding us up? What's going on? Those people, you know, they want another shot. So we left that bus full of red faces. It was very funny, very, very funny. So after that, I ended up becoming a camera person. Now the thing about, you start off in news and then you slowly work your way back. News, current affairs, docos, drama, and you know, you build on your experience. I covered stories like the Azaria Chamberlain case. That was pretty amazing. Politics, crime. We did a drug story on the North Coast where they've been following a yacht full of marijuana down the coast for about 3 months, and they'd had submarines and all sorts of tracking. You know, it was federal police, local police, the whole lot. We picked up this lonely hitchhiker on the road, and he got in the car, and he was a detective, as it turned out. He said, "We've lost the container we were following." And Peter George, who was my journalist at the time, we had the best scoop ever. And I've still got the letter at home from the head of news saying, "Thanks guys, you really scored well there." So we scooped everybody, all the commercial guys at the next day out the front of the court at Port Macquarie are looking at me going, "How did you do that?" That was, well, you pick up hitchhikers, don't you? So, during that time on news, I ended up also going to South Korea with a guy called Prakash Murchandani, who I don't know if you remember him, but he was a defence correspondent for a long, long time. Very well connected, had some really great connections in the Defence Department, and I did quite a lot of really good shoots with him. But we went to Korea to do a story on the Olympics that were just coming up in Seoul. And one of the other stories we decided to do was go up to the DMZ, to the border, and do a story about North and South Korea and what was going on and the military effect of that. So we went up to the border, and I ended up in the hut that's right on the border, surrounded by North Korean soldiers outside and protected by big burly Marines inside. So I thought, this is very interesting. Now, we had our defence attaché with us from the embassy, and I had trained him before we left Seoul on how to use my wind-up camera, which was the second camera I always carried in case the batteries failed and I could still keep working, a little Bell and Howell. So he had the Bell and Howell, and we, on the way up, that whole road was top secret. There were tank traps, all sorts of things around it, and we couldn't film that. He did. So we got all of this great footage from him about what it really was like there. And of course, for years later, the South Koreans are going, "How the hell did you do that?" Again, Prakash, a really, really talented man, very nice man to work with. Then there was the famous exchange between another journalist I loved working with, Jeff Sims, and Neville Rand, the Premier at the time. This is in 1983, outside the Street Royal Commission, investigating allegations of corruption, and Sims attempted to ask Rand about the Commission's findings. Rand famously interrupted him with the rhetorical question, "Are you from the ABC?" Now, do you remember that one? So there it goes. So he was, that got very interesting as well. After news, I joined a show called Nationwide, which was the current affairs show at the time, now it's 7:30, but Nationwide became the TDT, so it was TDT, This Day Tonight, Nationwide, 7:30. And I joined that. We did some amazing stories on that. I was in the Philippines with Ian Cross when they were handing down the Aquino report about Marcos and what he'd done and all the corruption that had happened. And one of the memories I had from that particular shoot was being in a room beside a rice packing factory, and there's a couple in there, a granddad and his wife. He is dying of starvation, and I'm filming him. His daughter was working as a prostitute down at the naval base with the Americans down the road, and the grandkids are with him. So it was one of the most touching scenes I've ever had in my life. Now, just after that, literally about an hour later, I'm in a room across the way that's about twice as big as this guy's office. He was one of the richest men in the Philippines, and so we had this incredible contrast of incredible wealth and such poverty. And that's my really underlying memory of the Philippines, the contrast and why they live all over the world, and they're amazing people. They're just amazing people. That same year was the year that Mrs. Gandhi was assassinated. And I went over to India to cover that. And I went with a journalist called Mary Delahunty, who later became a politician in Victoria. Lovely woman to work with, really fantastic. So there was a great moment. We're at the funeral, and we were given quite close access to where the actual cremation was happening. Mary wanted to do a piece to camera with the crowd behind her, and she looked at me and said, "David, what the hell is going on? Why are you looking like that?" And what was going on was, she's standing there, behind her are 6 million people pushing forward, being beaten back by the police. And I'm getting worried. I'm going, we've done 3 takes, we need to get out of here because we're about to get run over. And I want to get out of here. So that was a funny moment, because she looked at me and, "What are you doing?" Now, what I loved about that, I think this is another great ABC moment, going to that cremation, I'm wandering along the road and I'm walking with Willie Pua. Now, does anyone remember Willie Pua? He lived in Singapore. We had our own family, camera crew family in Singapore, the Pua family. Willie is walking along the road. I knew him quite well by this point. I'd run into him quite a lot. Willie and I were having a chat. His 80-year-old uncle was doing the sound for him. So we had the Pua family, me with my soundie, and we were off covering it. They were doing news, I was doing the current affairs story. But I love the fact that, there's a real family story with the ABC. The Pua family, his nephew ended up in China, and he was there at Tiananmen Square, and he filmed that, which was also covered by another friend of mine, a guy called Trevor Watson. So those guys covered the whole of Asia. They were extraordinary. And I was lucky enough to get in and out of there occasionally and do the same thing. So, I covered a lot of great Southeast Asian stories. I did one on the Kunmi Chai, the Condom King, which was hilarious because everywhere he went, he'd just throw condoms to people. So it was a very funny shoot. But it was all about family planning and what the Thais were doing for family planning. So at the same time, I managed to end up at a bus in a marketplace where I filmed 200 men having a vasectomy. It was a world record. And these, Thai men going, "Oh, I can't have anything like that happen to me," coming out going, "I'm free now." So that was quite wonderful. Those were some great moments. Anyhow, I come back. I'm back in Oz. I ended up in Arnhem Land. And I'm going to Arnhem Land to do a story on Gularoy Yunupingu, who's a fantastic guy. My journalist is a guy called Patrick O'Neill. Anyone remember him? Patrick was quite a character. He was a boy, he was English, he'd gone to school at Eton. His father was a lord. He was Northern Irish, so he had quite an interesting way of looking at the world. Patrick turns up to go into Arnhem Land wearing a pith helmet and a white safari suit. And I'm looking at him going, Patrick, what the hell are you dressed like that for? This is so... Anyhow, what I loved about that was Gulleroy, he just chose to ignore Patrick's nod to our colonial past. And we got on with it. And off we drove into this amazing orchard. That's what I saw. I mean, most of us look at the world of the Aboriginal lands and go, oh, this is just a bunch of trees. No, it was fruit trees, it was all sorts of trees. I met so many amazing Indigenous people on that shoot. And it just opened up a world of oppression and abuse that I knew was there, but to be there personally involved on their land, in their time, was really fabulous. Really fabulous. I ended up on this incredible show called Four Corners. Because I'm getting to the pinnacle of my current affairs, so it was fabulous. And my first gig was going to Kenya to cover the end of the UN Decade of Women. So I'm at this massive conference with world leaders. I've got Reagan's daughter making a speech, and it was an amazing place to be. In Nairobi itself, at the university, there was an alternative conference going on, and we met some of the most amazing feminists in the world. People like Gloria Steinem, Germaine Greer. It was just extraordinary. So after I did that shoot, we popped down to Zambia, because the ANC were not in power at this point. They were living in Zambia and hiding out on a farm outside Lusaka. We wanted to do a story on an interview with Oliver Tambo. He was the president in exile of the ANC at the time. So we filmed away, and we got some great stuff. Umbeke was also staying there, so I got to meet these guys. What I didn't find out until later was, while we were there, their main office in town was blown up by the South African Secret Service. So it could have been us further up the road on the farm, but it wasn't. But, you know, amazing times, amazing times. The next year I ended up in Cuba. And this was kind of the story that this is when I decided I should leave Four Corners, because it was so political, this particular story. But I did leave it, and I went off and did something else which was even more interesting. But let's get back to Cuba. So we went to film an interview with Fidel. Who doesn't? You know, there's a film called Waiting for Fidel, which is a Canadian film, and it's a rich American who was going to interview Fidel, and the director realised that it wasn't going to happen, so he filmed a debate between him and this American millionaire about Cuba. Well, we didn't get that way. We started out on our first day with Ramon, Fidel's elder brother, and the first thing he did was he said, look, have a taste of this. It was a Bloody Mary. So it's breakfast time. I'm drinking Bloody Marys. So we're interviewing local people. We're going around. He's introducing us to all of these Cubans, and, you know, because we were there to see Cuba and talk to the Cubans. And that's what we want to talk about, this wonderful place and what it had done. And I've got to say, I've been there a couple of times now. It is an extraordinary country, and they're remarkable people. And a lot of it's to do with what we've done, Australians have done, with our sugar industry and how we've gone over there. Anyhow, we finished today with a new drink that he'd invented, made from rum and drinking yogurt, which was pretty mad. And I can still remember, I'm in this house, and there's a picture over there of a Russian astronaut, and the whole thing, it was very Russian. So I was having lunch recently with Ray Martin, and I discovered he'd had the same experience 10 years earlier. So he had been there and done the same thing. Now, the sad thing is, we never got that interview with Fidel. And apparently nor did Ray 10 years earlier. So they were very clever. They vet you. And that's what Ramon had done. So we did do a story. It was called Calypso Communism. And it was really lovely. He delved deep into the history of Cuba. We went to some amazing places. We went out to music festivals, and I found myself filming on the stage with a fabulous Cuban band at 3 or 4 in the morning. You know, and I'd been going since about 7 the day before, so, you know, it was great. And they only warmed up at about 4 o'clock in the morning, the Cubans. So we ended up doing a lot of interviews on my hotel room veranda. because we realised that we were being monitored by the Secret Service and they were recording us. And the only place that we knew we were safe and we could get secure interviews was out in the veranda of my hotel room, 6 floors up over Havana. So that's what we did. We also went down to Guantanamo, and I was lucky enough I was filming the town of Guantanamo and also Cuban troops doing exercises nearby. So at one point we ended up in the local school in Guantanamo on the roof, filming into Guantanamo Bay. So I've got this incredible shot of the Americans looking at me like this. You know, and I do love America for its freedom, because about 2 years later I ended up in the headquarters of the FBI, and they knew who I was. They knew what I'd done. And I was given carte blanche. And, you know, it's about knowing what you're dealing with, and that's what the Yanks do very well. So, because on the way back from Cuba, I had to fly back through San Fran, and they x-rayed all my film, which was, I'm going, please don't. Why? I'm just transiting. Oh, we're x-raying everything. And they were just trying to muck me up as much as they could. Anyhow, I got back from that shoot, and I thought, I've had enough of Four Corners, it's too crazy. So I ended up leaving the world of current affairs and joining the world of Compass and places like that, science shows. So I did a couple of great shoots. I did a Compass special with Geraldine Doo on the Catholic Church. We were interviewing bishops all over the country, meeting amazing priests and nuns. I have a great memory of sitting in the sacristy at Terry Hills, just over here, filming a priest who had started a group called the Family Group Movement. And Peter was telling these terrible bishop jokes out in the sacristy, and I thought, oh God, you know, he was a very funny man. And I wandered out, and out in the main church was a lovely young Italian family, and their child was getting baptised. If they could hear what was going on in the sacristy, they would have been going, oh God. I think they probably did, but, you know, it was Terry Hills. That's the way Terry Hills was. Now, Peter became a family friend, and he actually baptised my kids, and I eventually made a fabulous film about that family group movement. Wonderful, amazing thing. I still at the ABC, ended up on Quantum, which was the science show at the time. It had come in after Towards 2000, which only lasted for about a year, and then Quantum came along, and I was looking forward to doing some amazing stuff with Quantum, travelling the world. Science is so much easier to work on than current affairs, because people like to see you. You're not there to make life hard for them. You're there to help them and to promote their products or their ideas. And so it was much more fun to do that. The shoot I remember most about that was going to Arnhem Land, where they were just setting up a uranium mine, the Ranger uranium mine. And the ANU had put in a science team to monitor what they were doing and make sure they were doing it correctly, so there was no radiation leaking out into Kakadu National Park, which was right beside them. And we spent a lot of time flying around in helicopters filming this science crew. It was a really interesting shoot, and I discovered a lot of the older mines up there the tailings dams had collapsed, and there was a lot of radioactive country through the Northern Territory, which we don't really know about. We were wandering around for Geiger counter. We knew about it. We found out. Pretty interesting. So while we were shooting that, I also had a marvellous time looking at. I noticed there was a lot of bushfires going on, and we realised that the Indigenous people up there were doing backburns and keeping the fires down. Now, I have this amazing memory of walking into, and I don't know if you've gone to Kakadu, but where the rock art is, you can walk in, there's a path, and you walk along the path and you come up and there's rock paintings here and rock paintings there. It's just fabulous. Well, the first day I went in to do that, they were burning on both sides of the path as I'm walking in, and I felt quite safe because I knew that their low burns were good and they were safe and they weren't going to hurt me, because I would be standing there with my film camera getting a shot of a bushfire coming towards me, and I'd just walk away, going on a road. Fire would wash over the camera and be gone in 2 seconds, and I got the most amazing footage. I wouldn't want to do that now in some of the fires we've got coming up or we've had, which I've had a lot to do with. So after after Quantum, I did that. I was also, I'd been there long enough by now, it's 14 years into my life at the ABC. I was getting gigs like acting senior film officer and things like that. So I had a whole bunch of really extraordinary people resign on me. And I thought, oh, okay. Anyhow, the phone rang. It was someone from Beyond 2000 saying, we like what you've done on Quantum. Would you like to come and work for us on Beyond 2000? I thought, yes, because Quantum had run out of money. They weren't going to do those overseas trips. And Beyond was about to go mad, and it was full of the most amazing ABC people. And people like Jeff Watson, who was a good friend of mine, and I just thought, I'd love to do this. So I left the ABC. It's 1987. I've gone. Years of freelance work ensued. Just after the Olympics in 2000, I was one of the crews that were covering the Olympics for the organisers. I got a phone call from a guy called Phil Snyder, who was the head of film services at Gore Hill. And he wanted to know if I'd be interested in coming back with my gear as a freelance camera person, helping them make their docos that they were doing on shows like Catalyst, Compass, Message Stick. Of course I said yes. I love the ABC. When I was freelancing, my favourite people that I worked with were ABC people. They were the best, they were the most professional, and they were the most unbiased. They really were good. So the years that ensued were fabulous. A Message Stick shoot on an incredible man, Banjo Clark, near Warrnambool in Victoria, took me into a world of stolen children, lost lives, and real courage and strength. Whenever I'm near Warrnambool, I go to the valley where his grave is and look down into the valley and think of the stories he told us about the children running in there, hiding from us, as though they're coming to take them away from their parents. It was pretty amazing stuff. And his story was just extraordinary. Then Australian Story was another place I loved working, just loved it. I did a story of Christina Keneally after she'd been the Premier, and what I loved about that was the first thing she said was, look, I know you want to talk to me about New South Wales politics and that sort of stuff, but I'm not going to talk about it. I want to talk about the stillborn child I had and the effect it had on me, and I want to talk to women about that. And I want to see if I can help them. And that's the story we made. It was fabulous. I did a great story on a guy called David Hicks. Remember him? Yeah. He ended up in Guantanamo, funnily enough. Now, to do an interview with him, he lived in a flat, and Australian Story liked to have the background deep out of focus. Now, with the cameras I had then, unlike these ones, which you can get your depth of field is focus in and out behind you. You can get it quite easily on these. On my old video cameras that I was using in those days, depth of field was hard to get. So you had to get a long way back to get that background out of focus. And it meant I'd go into his house. I would set my camera up in the shower receptacle and sit on an aluminium case. He was sitting in the hallway beside the door of his bedroom because I could put a light there and I could get a shot of him and get room for the producer. And I had to light the whole lounge room behind him as well. So we did that for 3 days, that interview, 3 8-hour days. Helen, the producer, knew there was another reason why he went back to Afghanistan, and she wanted him to tell us that. He'd already written a book. He wasn't going to change his story, so he kept going. We kept going. We ended up with 3 days of interviews, and it was a fabulous story to shoot. Now, he turned to me at the end of that and gave me one of the quotes of my life. We've just done 3 8-hour days grilling him. He turned to me and said, "That was worse than being at Guantanamo." And I agreed.
How are you going, Dan?
I've got another couple of pages. Am I doing all right?
I think we just have to sort of finish.
All right, well,
because I'm going to, sorry to be the director who does the cut. So just, we've got quite a lot of, there's going to be somebody, people are going to want to ask some questions.
Yep,
so
that's
why
fine.
don't we just have 33 questions?
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions for Dave?
Let's give Dave a cut first.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much. I think one that's the thing for me, David, from your talk, is that sometimes the story that you go there to film or to cover is not the actual story.
No, it's
and I mean,
not.
that's the talent of exceptional journalism, I think, is that to really delve and find out what is, you know, and what that individual is willing to share with people like yourself.
It is. It's very much so, as I say, living it vicariously. It really is. Yeah.
Sorry,
It really
questions?
is.
We've probably got time for about 3 or 4 because David's been so incredibly informative. Yes? Janine will bring you the microphone, just bear with me.
Quick one, where can we hear the rest of what you were going to say?
Okay, I'll give you some. I'll a quick précis. Oh, Bob Hawke. I'd done a lot of work with Bob, and mainly in the ACTU days. And we did this wonderful interview with him and Kerry O'Brien, and he turned to me and said, I said to him at the end of it, I love those days when you were head of the ACT. You used to get really stuck into those commercial journalists. He said, yeah, it was good, wasn't it? He enjoyed himself. They're the sort of things I'm talking about. There's only one other thing I want to say, and it's something that is close to me, and I will say that and I'll shut up. Because it's about 2013, 5:30 in the morning, I get a phone call from a friend of mine. There's been a helicopter crash. And Gary was a very dear friend of mine. So I lost a very close friend. I lost 2 other people. They were wonderful, wonderful people. I've never forgotten that day. And I'll live with it forever. I did some wonderful flies with Gary over the years. So he was one of the special ones. He really was.